Go check out the excellent collection of t-shirts available at popthreads.com and use our discount code Simpsons at checkout to save 15% on your order. It helps out our show and it saves you a little bit of dough. Thank you again for listening to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show, and thank you for supporting our sponsor, popthreads.com. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as MrMostDaysOff, and today we are just about done with Season 4, only a couple episodes to go, and we're going to be talking about Marge in Chains. I, of course, will not be alone on this journey. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime and your co-host with the most, Richie theWizKid. How you doing today, Rich?
I think I'm a little hungry today. I feel like I could go with a crepe or something, possibly while I'm swimming. But if only there's some kind of invention that existed that could give me this delicious treat.
I can't believe they invented it.
But I guess we're going to have to talk about my hunger here. I'll go ahead and throw it back to you to stay in line with that. The man, the myth, the marshmallow square. It is Miles.
Oh, we lost the exact amount the marshmallow squares would have brought in.
That was a sweet victory moment for Marge that we'll get to. But I really, really liked that moment, but for the wrong reasons.
I feel ya. So, you can tell by the title and the fact that we're talking about Marge, this is going to be a very Marge-centric episode, and I don't think that Richie or I have ever hidden the fact that a lot of times, the Marge episodes are our least favorite. But at the same time, there are also sometimes where we set the bar a little low with our expectations, and I don't know about you, but that was the case with me, because this one exceeded where I thought it was going to be. Though I don't think it's going to be competitive with some of the incredible episodes that we've been having lately. It's still a really damn good episode for the tail end of the season.
Yeah, and my thing was, thinking back to my memories on this episode, especially with the title, Marge in Chains, you typically think about this episode and you're like, oh yeah, Marge is in jail pretty quickly and she's there the whole time. I looked at the time counter after Marge started walking into the prison, and it was after 17 minutes into the episode. So there's plenty of time for other things to be happening that are very funny in this episode. I've noticed that a lot lately, where you remember the theme of episodes from when you were younger, but like the actual thing, like Whacking Day, they didn't start the Whacking Day stuff till halfway through the episode or past that point where they start talking about Whacking Day. It's weird how you remember things and then it plays out completely different, and it's almost like you don't remember all the good times in episodes like this.
Yeah, there's been several episodes where they don't actually get to the main point or the main plot line until at least into the second act, sometimes even longer, it seems. And at least with this one, we do have a pretty good reason for that. From the director's commentary, they actually talked about how this episode was originally going to be much more serious. They actually spent a lot of time researching women's prisons, and they were going to have the majority of the episode with Marge in jail, but as things went, they thought it would be funnier as they kept getting more and more jokes. They kept trimming more and more of the main plot away and kept going to these cutaways, which, again, we've talked about before. It's kind of fascinating to think about, because even at this time, they were worried that they were doing it too much yet again. And as we know in today's world, shows like Family Guys, that's all they do. There is no real storyline going through as much as it is just cutaway joke to cutaway joke. And The Simpsons were doing that all the way back in the early 90s, and they were making sure not to push that pedal too far because they wanted to make sure that there was continuity in their show, to some extent.
What I think about this episode, and it totally makes sense with the director's commentary you're just speaking on, Phil Hartman has to be the MVP of this episode again, doesn't he?
Oh, of course, yeah, and I love anytime you see both Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure. It's so great to get both of his main characters in the show, and it seems like a lot of times, maybe it's just because they have Phil Hartman on hand, so like, fuck it, let's put them in both, but it does seem like a lot of the times, if you have Troy McClure, you're going to get Lionel Hutz and vice versa.
Yeah, but this is one of those episodes, again, where, for me, Lionel Hutz just was fantastic. There were so many great moments with him in this episode that, obviously, like we keep saying, we will get to. We'll get there, guys, I promise.
Let's go ahead and get there. We're talking about Marge in Chains, which is actually a parody of the very popular at the time Alice
Or
in
just
Chains.
the New Black. Oh, wait, sorry.
Isn't Marge is the New Black? I was going to say at some point, I think they actually revisit this prison concept in one of the most recent episodes, or recent seasons, I should say. And I believe it was a parody of Orange is the New Black. So that'll be an exciting one to get one and compare and contrast all the way back to season 4, if we can remember that far when we actually get there. This episode debuted on May 6, 1993. The chalkboard gag on this one was, I do not have diplomatic immunity. And the couch gag is one I love even more now after the series Rick and Morty, because we get Tiny Simpsons running into the couch for the couch gag.
I wonder if the diplomatic immunity is in reference to Lethal Weapon 2. I have diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, they were probably watching that movie, like, falling asleep the night before they wrote this or something.
I'm going to look up what year that movie came out, because I feel like that's a joke in that general direction.
That would be really funny. We already talked about it a little bit, but this episode actually opens up with I Can't Believe They Invented It, with none other than Troy McClure. You may recognize him from such movies as P is for Psycho, or The President's Neck is Missing.
I like how the P in Psycho has, like, no connotation. It doesn't sound similar at all.
No, it has more of an S sound, the silent P.
Yeah, that's what makes that so funny.
I also like that there's a Psycho reference, like a Hitchcockian Psycho reference later on in the show.
Absolutely. But just for people wondering, Lethal Weapon 2 came out in 1989, so it can very well be
it's possible. Yeah, totally. Well, Troy McClure is discussing the struggles of juicing an orange. Of course, the only way to do it is with your eyeball, and this is verified when we see Homer Simpson watching at home, also juicing an orange with an eyeball. That was the only way, Richie, but now there's a better way. Can you believe it? It's the juice loosener, invented by none other than Dr. Nick Riviera.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Nick.
I like that he also had the suntan lotion, too.
Yeah, what was it? It was the Sun and Run, a sunscreen that is also a laxative.
The suntan lotion that's also a laxative. You see Troy McClure's face get very concerned and he runs off
He
stage.
runs off, yeah. But the juice loosener is the product they're here to pitch today, and I love when they first introduce it, they're like, sure, you could overpay at the grocery store where the farmers probably spit in the fruit anyway, or you can conveniently make your own juice at home. And when they demonstrate it, they put an entire bag of oranges in for a drop of juice, but Troy McClure still puts it over as if it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Wow, you got all that from just one bag of oranges?
Like I said, it's like a drop that comes out.
Yeah, there's one drop that comes out and he holds the glass up and he's so excited, but the whole time that they're putting the bag of oranges in there, there's pieces like splashing out of the top and there's no cover to the top, which you think would be a normal thing to invent in this machine, is something to cover the top so this doesn't happen.
Well, it's like running a blender without a top. You're just going to make a giant mess and waste a lot of your product. But hey, that's going to help sell more oranges. Maybe it was invented by Big Orange Juice.
Nice. I like that the thing is rattling and making so much noise while it's going on. And Troy McClure's like yelling, like, wow, this is the quietest machine I've ever heard.
Yes, it operates at just a whisper.
And it's like clearly rattling louder than they're talking.
They're like screaming at each other.
Yeah.
Actually, on that note, I just being born in the 80s made me laugh that Troy McClure is actually walking through the audience and you can see the microphone cable trailing behind him, which that just made me giggle because we're in an age where now microphones are not only wireless, but can fit on like the tip of your finger, and he's carrying around this clunky old thing with a cord that's just following him down the stairs, through the aisles. It doesn't matter. It's behind him.
And that's a part of movie and TV history. I mean, just like in the original Halloween, you can see the cable on the front, in the opening scene on the front porch.
Well, that was actually a mistake, though. That was actually a movie mistake left in the original Halloween, where there was, extension cables that were running the lights for the movie production crew. They were accidentally in one shot of the film. Also, you can see John Carpenter actually smoked cigarettes at the time of that filming.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where you can see his cigarette smoke being exhaled across the camera, which it's kind of funny to think. Such an accomplished filmmaker, and he's making these rookie mistakes. But to be fair, this was like one of his first films, so it makes sense.
And he was under a terrible amount of stress during that, too.
High stress, low budget. Yeah, it's insane, dude. Like, the idea of making a movie always sounds really fun, but then when you watch the behind the scenes, it's basically like 6 people that are essentially killing themselves for their art and just pouring everything they have into it for a series of usually a few weeks.
Tell us how you really feel.
But back to The Simpsons. The demonstration works at least on Homer. I was actually surprised. It clearly works on Homer because he cannot wait to order his juice loosener. He says he needs to lose weight so that his heart stops hurting every time he answers the phone. We then cut to the Chinese factory where the juice loosener is actually made, and we actually see a box addressed to 742 Evergreen Terrace. So we do have the address correct in this episode. And they are shipping him a juice loosener. The 2 employees, though, they're talking, this whole scene is great, because just like an old Godzilla movie, the audio is out of sync.
They're actually, it's dubbed.
Right.
Because they would speak Japanese in real life, but it's them, like, their mouths moving at Japanese language speak, but they're speaking English. Oh no, Godzilla is coming! That kind of thing.
One of them is saying, please don't tell the boss that I've been working with the flu, but they just laugh it off because he's like, oh, don't worry, I've been working for months with a broken pelvis. As they're laughing, the employee with the flu actually sneezes or coughs into Homer's package, and you can physically see the virus fill the box right as they seal it up and ship it to the United States. We see 6 to 8 weeks later, Homer is literally crying because he thinks he's never going to get his juicer. But Bart brings in a package label to him, and immediately when they open it up, the virus actually attacks him. I love that he actually screams as if he's being physically assaulted by a real presence.
And everyone seems to be able to see the virus. I mean, what's up with the townspeople of Springfield?
It's like they live, speaking of John Carpenter. They're all here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and they're all out of bubblegum, or flu medicine at this point. I was actually just surprised. Like, I expect Homer to be swindled by these things, but we see a series where Skinner is giving his mother a juicer. Mother, I hope you have an extra special hug ready. Good Lord! The germs are entering every orifice of my face!
Well, think about it this way. When you have an A-list celebrity like Troy McClure backing something like this up, it's going to sell more units. And Dr. Nick did just recently perform a quadruple bypass surgery, so, you know, they're pretty high up in their
highly accredited.
Right. I didn't know flammable meant or inflammable meant flammable.
Even Patty and Selma are suckered into this product. They each give each other a juice loosener for their birthdays. And I actually laughed every single time I watched this because they both open the box at the same time. The flu goes right to their face, and they both scream in unison. And the visual image of that just absolutely killed me every single time. Probably the absolute best, though, we see the big cloud of flu virus actually going down Main Street and abiding by the traffic laws, I'd like to point out. It stops at the red lights, which is kind of hilarious. I also really enjoy, there's kind of this creepy ambient music going on that's just perfect for the mood. The virus starts to creep up on Chief Wiggum as he's getting lunch, and Wiggum opens fires. He pulls out his gun and starts shooting into the cloud, but he too is overtaken by the flu.
But it's a very smart little scene because it's done like a horror movie where the camera flips to the viewpoint of the virus sneaking up behind Wiggum, and Wiggum kind of does that, like, turn over his shoulder, look back, and he's like, ah, ah, ah! And then he pulls out his gun and starts, like, randomly firing, and then he throws the gun at it. Like, it was just so funny.
I think there's just a few of many of the Hitchcock references they put into this episode, and in the series in general. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so well shot here. The animation, there's actually a lot of times in this episode, I'll point out some more later, where the animation just knocked my socks off. Like, it reminds me of when we talked about the episode Radio Bart, where Toby pointed out that shot where Bart was falling down the well. Shout out to Toby from the Secret Transmission podcast, by the way. Great show. Let's go ahead and shout out to Kristen and Rudy, too, so we don't get in trouble.
Yeah, you do that. You know, I'm all good with Rudy. Rudy's a good guy.
Yeah, but I just, when Toby pointed out that well shot, I just thought that was really fascinating. And there's a couple of shots similar to that in this episode, and the way that they play with the camera angles in this one reminded me of that in general.
I just love that they actually did this in '93, where they're still making fun of that kind of shot where Wiggum even threw his gun. It wouldn't have been as funny because he would just be firing his gun into like random public, but he actually threw the gun too. Which
you always got to throw the gun when you run out of bullets, right?
Exactly. I mean, he's a cop that only has one clip apparently, but you know.
We then cut to Kent Brockman, who on the news is talking about the spread of the dreaded Osaka flu. There have now been over 300 cases in Springfield alone. He cuts to Artie Pie in the Sky, who is giving a report about Route 401. Traffic is just going round and around and around and around and around. Oh, you better watch out on the corner of 12th and Main, because I'm going to get sick. We cut to Otto, who's sunbathing, unfortunately, seemingly on the corner of 12th and Main, because it's another fantastic shot where we're actually looking down the throat of Otto as he's screaming in what I assume has to be Artie's discharge falling down into his face.
It's a Stan Marsh barfing at Wendy moment.
It's gross but hilarious. Back at the Simpsons home, Bart is actually excited about the spread of the flu because he sees it as an opportunity to get the day off of school. Unfortunately, when Marge takes his temperature, it seems like he's just fine, but he asks maybe you could check it just one more time. We get another great shot. This time the camera zooms in straight into Bart's eyeball, and it looks amazing as we cut into a scene where Bart's immune system is in battle with the flu virus, but the lieutenant, who sounds a lot like the squeaky voiced teenager, is saying, "Sir, we keep getting reports that we want to surrender to the virus, that we want to lose to this virus." And then, for whatever reason, Bart's commanding white blood cell is also the voice of Snake.
All right.
Hey, I like the dialogue between this whole thing is great too, because when the general finds out he's supposed to lose, he goes, it must be a school day. Lay down your arms.
All right. Let's make some pus.
That just kills me every time.
Literally, it's killing you.
Pretty much, yeah, as my immune system shuts down at my control. Bart is got his wish. He is now relaxing on the couch, watching Itchy and Scratchy. The show is interrupted by the mayor saying that he is not going to leave his office for his scheduled vacation. No, not at a time when the city is under attack, having an absolute outbreak of the influenza.
What a nice mayor, that Mayor Quimby. You know, he's a good guy.
And we've talked about a few of these jokes where they do the expanded scene. Like, for instance, we talked about Duffless. This was great, where the camera would zoom out and you'd see things like all three flavors of Duff are just really the same. In this case, as the camera pans out, we see that Mayor Quimby is only wearing the top half of a suit. He's actually wearing board shorts, and he is, in fact, on an island set of his office on the beach. And it's all given away when a guy playing a steel drum actually walks through. He says, "Hey, get that steel drum out of the mayor's office."
What? You mean a politician was lying?
I know, unheard of.
I can't believe I voted for that guy.
One man who is not going to be affected by the flu virus is Mr. Burns. With all his wealth, he has built a germ-free chamber that not a single microbe could pass in or out of. But as he's demonstrating and showing this to Mr. Smithers, Homer is already somehow in the chamber eating a giant sandwich, which, real quick note on the giant sandwich, apparently, much like Jub Jub, the giant sandwich bit is something that Conan was just absolutely obsessed with. But some people said that he claimed it was because he was in fact himself eating a giant sandwich when he got the call that he was going to get the job. So he throws that joke in a lot anytime you see a giant sandwich. Other than the exceptionally giant one that was going back.
The hoagie.
We know that was a Mike Reese story. But this bit with Homer just holding an oversized sandwich is usually a Conan idea.
But doesn't it make that scene like even better? Because like Homer has to be doing something while he's in this little chamber, or else like he would just be sitting there looking around. So like him having a sandwich and just going about his day makes it almost funnier, if that makes sense.
And it's also very funny. It's very short and very sweet, but another very quick moment where Homer gets advice from his own brain.
I like it when it opens up and Burns actually sees him, the little exchange that they have there with Homer and his brain and Mr. Burns, where Burns says, "Who the devil are you?"
"Don't panic. I just need a good story."
"My name is Mr. Burns."
"Don't!"
Anytime Homer does that, "Hello, I believe you have a package for me," bit, it's always so funny.
My name is Mr. Burns. Oh, what's your first name?
I don't know.
So, everyone is afflicted by the outbreak of the flu virus in Springfield. A lot of its residents are actually protesting at Dr. Hibbert's office. They demand a cure. Dr. Hibbert explains, the cure is bed rest. Anything else I could possibly give you would just be a placebo.
Where can we get these placebos?
Hey, maybe there's some in this truck. And then they actually knock the truck over, and it's carrying killer bees, so they start swarming the protesters. The best part, though, is one of them actually snatches a bee out of the air and eats it, and proclaims, I'm cured! I mean, ouch! I have a feeling the next scene will be your favorite scene, correct me if I'm wrong, but we cut to the Flanders home, where Rod is exceptionally proud to tell his father that Todd is speaking in tongues. Ned wishes that were the case. In fact, he even prays for it. And then he knows that his son is just delirious with flu.
Why has God forsaken us?
Well, I just can't imagine, honey. Oh my. And first of all, Flanders just has this great look on his face of absolute horror. And we cut to a flashback where he was on the couch alone, watching Fox television when Married with Children came off. They did a joke that could allude to a man's limp penis, Richie. Can you believe the audacity of the type of comedy, or what they call comedy in this day and age, they'd put on network television?
Well, the best part is that Ned actually laughs at it, too. And that's the part that I felt was very out of character, and why he feels so bad right now. And as soon as he laughs, you hear that thunder strike outside.
And then you get another great visual of Ned actually with, like, the fear of the Lord in his eyes. It's really funny.
And it's like he realizes in modern time that this is his comeuppance for laughing at that joke so many weeks ago.
And maybe one of the best lines in the entire episode, I don't know if it's the best, but he's like, oh god, the network slogan is true. Watch the Fox network and your soul will be damned for eternity.
Yeah. I remember those slogans.
I still just love any time the Simpsons get away with taking, like, such a hard shot at Fox, because they do it all the time. And we also talk a lot about the dichotomy between Fox News and Fox sitcoms and animation, and just how crazy off the other end of the spectrum they are from each other. So it's very interesting that the Simpsons gets to take so many seemingly free shots at their network.
Well, by this point, though, the Simpsons are so popular that Fox just has to bend over and take it, I would think.
If they want to make money, they will.
Yeah.
So back at the Simpsons home, Marge is looking pretty worn out, and you can see that her family being sick is starting to take a toll on her. Lisa wants some orange juice, Bart wants some of those Flintstones chewable morphine pills. Marge points out this don't exist, so Homer gets mad and is like, the boy's wasting your time! Now come change the channel and pat my head.
Why doesn't Lisa just make her own orange juice with her juicer?
Well, I mean, it's going to take like 30 bags of oranges to get a glass of juice out of that, Richie.
Yeah, but the whole town's full, so she should still just use the juicer herself.
You would think. She's usually a little bit more self-efficient, but I think it's okay for an 8-year-old girl to need her mom. I think we'll let that one slide. Either way, it really is wearing on Marge, and even Abe Simpson is letting her have it. He wants bourbon, but of course Marge reminds him, you can't have liquids after 3. Well, I'll just mix it into my mush then.
Oh, God. Oh.
The important thing is I want.
I can't imagine mush with
bourbon
or mush in general.
Well, it's like bourbon pudding, which I guess that's not bread pudding with like a bourbon sauce is good. But yeah, just to pour straight bourbon into like oatmeal, ugh, no bueno. So I mentioned Marge was looking kind of worn out in the last scene. In the next scene, she is full on losing it. She's at the Quickie Mart doing some shopping, trying to get all of the miscellaneous things that her family has been demanding of her.
Which, don't go to the Quickie Mart for all that stuff, because that's like going to buy stuff at the gas station. You're going to be paying multiple dollars more for each of those individual items.
Yeah, like $24.99 for a tiny bottle of aspirin, for instance.
I don't know. When's the last time you bought aspirin?
I haven't bought, like, a ton of aspirin in my life, but I'm pretty confident that $24.99 should buy, like, a shit ton of aspirin, not, like, a tiny little container of it.
I don't know. We're going to have to price check that.
We'll have to fact check ourselves.
Best darn diddly on the scene.
You know what? Maybe even if today the bottle's $24.99, which I think it would be a third of that easily, it's still at $93. That's got to be insane, right?
A whole Homer paycheck.
Either way, the food on the shelves are actually turning into her family's faces. It's repeating all the things that they were demanding over and over again. Marge is downright cracking. It looks like she's starting to have you know what? It looks like she needs another weekend at Rancho Relaxo, we'll say, because it's getting to her. In fact, when she's leaving the store after she's checked out, it sets off the alarm system. Apu quickly points out that it's clearly a mistake, but if you could just take a couple steps to your left, which perfectly lines her up with the measuring stick so they can get an appropriate height, which, wow, 8'6". I know a lot of that is hair, but that is a tall chick right there.
Well, Homer's taller than her. Without the hair. And I forgot what Homer's height, but we should know it.
Well, I think it might change a little from time to time, because I don't think Marge is 8'6" in most episodes, even with her hair.
I don't know. She might be. I think she got about 3 feet of hair.
Regardless of how much hair it is, I cannot get over Colonel Quickie Mart's Kentucky Bourbon. How awful would that taste? I don't really like bourbon, to be honest. It's not my drink of choice, but the last bottle I'm going to get is something called Colonel Quickie Mart.
What I want to know is, what set off the front sensor? Was she carrying that bourbon, like, was it in a canteen already that's metal and sets off the metal detector, or did they have those little tags somewhere on the bottle? Like, I don't know how it set off the sensor.
I mean, I guess it would have to be the tag, because it wasn't in sort of any box or anything. That's an interesting question. I didn't even think about that.
I think Apu put something in there and then recorks it.
It's really just tea. Not the brownest of brown liquors.
I meant that he opens it up and, like, actually throws something in there.
Oh, got you.
It's the Quickie Mart, after all.
The alarm is set, which triggers the call to the cops, and when Wiggum shows up, he demands that Marge comes out with her hands up, and 2 cups of coffee, and an air freshener that says Capricorn, and something with coconut on it.
I don't know what to do. Like, if you get caught by the law, who do you turn to for help?
I love that both of Phil Hartman's characters are actually introduced in a similar way, because we cut to the mall, where we see the sign, "I can't believe it's a law firm." And as we know, when we met Troy McClure earlier, it was on the show, "I Can't Believe They Invented It." I thought that was just a funny little tie together. We are at a meeting between Lionel Hutz and the Simpsons family trying to defend Marge of this clearly accidental crime. Lionel Hutz assures Marge that she has made a good choice, because by choosing Lionel Hutz as a lawyer, you get this free smoking monkey toy.
Oh, God. And it literally just sits there puffing cigarettes. Can you imagine that in today's day and age?
Apparently, this was a very popular toy back in the day, and it was actually very similar to the candy cigarettes that we've discussed on this program in the past that they used to sell from the ice cream truck. Same concept. It was a thing that would just blow out powdered sugar in little bursts so it looked like the monkey was smoking cigarettes. But yeah, something that you would never find on today's shelf. Like, I can't even imagine a comparison in today's world of something that would be like that toy.
But the worst part is when Marge turns away the gift when Hutz opens the drawer and throws the monkey in with all the other smoking monkeys in that drawer. Can you imagine? That's such a fire hazard.
Well, it's just powdered sugar. It's not really a smoke.
Not these. These are actually smoking. Did you see the trail of smoke coming up?
Fair enough.
Powdered sugar doesn't trail like that, Miles.
I can't believe his loft isn't on fire.
Yeah. That is appropriate for Lionel Hutz.
Marge is explaining her case and saying it was just a mistake, and Lionel Hutz was feeling pretty confident that they could get her off until he realized that they have drawn Judge Snyder, who kind of dislikes Lionel Hutz a little bit.
Now, don't you worry, Mrs. Simpson. We've drawn Judge Snyder.
Is that bad?
Well, he's had it in for me ever since I kind of ran over his dog.
You did?
Well, replace the word kinda with the word repeatedly and the word dog with son.
Oh my God.
That's fucking awful.
That is such a dark joke. I mean, think about the type of cases that Lionel Hutz is usually trying. He decided that it was worth running over a man's child multiple times based on the outcome of one of these stupid cases.
He was on that Colonel Quickie Mart bourbon or something. I don't know.
This must have been before he was a friend of Bill's.
Oh, no, that's a very dark joke, but it's still hilarious.
So Homer just decides he'll just go to Apu man to man and take care of this. He asked if he will drop the charges. After all, he's Apu's #1 customer. Apu replies, "No offense, but we're going to put that bitch on ice." What a harsh thing to say about Marge! Oh my goodness, where does this hostility come from Apu?
Was there a joke going on in the commentary in that scene? Because Apu and his cousin were doing their like Indian thing at the beginning of the scene, and after Homer leaves, they keep doing it. But it kind of seemed like they were mocking to me a little bit.
I don't think that was the case. In fact, they did point out on the commentary that every scene they have between Sanjay and Apu, they are, in fact, I want to say the language was Hindi, if I'm not mistaken. I might be off on what language it was, but whatever language it was, again, I believe it was Hindi, it was 100% accurate, the conversation they were having. They did not say what they were saying to each other, however.
Oh,
so
no, that's when Marge gets arrested. I'm talking about when Homer walks in to talk, and they're, like, singing, basically.
Oh, they didn't mention anything. I didn't take anything else away from that personally.
They were just going like, la, 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 la. They did that, like, and it sounds like I'm mocking, but it literally sounded just like that.
I think we are totally cool on the offensive scale until you just tried to mimic it, sir.
But Hank Azaria isn't Hindi when he does it.
So Apu explains that prosecuting shoplifters to the fullest extent of the law is the policy of not only Quickie Mart, but their parent company, Nordic Defense Dynamics.
Well, and after that sentence with Apu is, like I said, where they do their little singing thing again, that I'm still unclear of if it was a mockery or whatnot. But is that where we get Quimby in the sauna next?
Yes,
I actually like his little spiel there.
Wiggum says to Quimby, "Now, don't tell anybody, but we just arrested Marge Simpson for shoplifting."
And then Quimby proceeds to tell everybody in town over a microphone that Marge is from here on known as a shoplifter. In other news, the chick in the crying game is really a man.
Boo!
I mean, man, isn't that a great movie?
Yay! What the fuck is the point of this meeting that they're having? Like, what is the purpose of the speech that he's giving that includes the fact that town resident and otherwise good citizen Marge Simpson has been arrested for shoplifting, and he expresses some opinions on the movie The Crying Game? What drew in a crowd for this particular town hall meeting?
Maybe it's the weekly town hall meeting, so they need filler. It's proven that the whole town is full of gossip, basically.
That's a good point. That is kind of the overall theme of this episode, is the gossiping. And in fact, at the very next scene, we see a poker game. I guess it must be at Reverend Lovejoy's house, because Reverend and Helen Lovejoy were there, along with Miss Hoover and Dr. Hibbert, who I love the fact that he was wearing a very Cosby-esque sweater. And of course, we know from prior episodes that Dr. Hibbert was originally designed as a parody of Bill Cosby, who they were competing with for time slots at this time, or competing with each other in the same time slot at this time.
Well, my thing is, if they are, like, we know Helen Lovejoy's such a gossip, and she always bothers me when she does it, which means I guess the character's doing what she's supposed to do, and yet they're having a poker game at the Reverend's house. Like, come on!
The only thing I was disappointed about is I thought it would have been really funny if there was like a giant pile of cash in the center of the game, because there was nothing but the cards on the table. So it looked like they were just playing for fun, and I think the scene would have been actually funnier if it looked like there was just like loads of money going into the pot.
They could have taken it even further, where like the Reverend loses his hand and he has him with cash. He goes, "Hold on 1 second, I'm back in," and he like looks over at the collection plate and takes a bunch of cash out.
That's brilliant. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I love taking it even one step further. That's great.
Hey, Simpsons writers, we're available to write episodes for you.
That's right. Let us know. So another Ned Flanders scene that I thought might compete for your favorite as well. I like both these Flanders scenes, but I know how much you love Flanders, and there are some good jokes here. This one, we see Flanders comforting Marge and saying, "Hey, Marge, it's cool. We've all had run-ins with the law. And he flashes to a time where he answers his door in the middle of the night. A police officer asks,
Are you Ed Flanders?
And he says, nope, I'm Ned. Have a good night.
And that's it.
And then actually takes it one bit further there, too. He's like, I'll never make that mistake again. And he shows, it pans out, he's got a giant name tag. It says, howdy, my name's Ned.
But see, Ned learns from his mistakes. I mean, how dare he answer the door to an officer?
Hopefully Marge can also learn, right? We actually then see Marge excuse herself from the table to go to the restroom, and Maude follows her, says, I'll keep an eye on her, and Ned gives kind of a sinister nod.
Was that Maude or Helen that followed? Oh, I don't remember who it was.
Wasn't it Maude Flanders? Yeah, it was Maude Flanders. Okay. They're at the Flanders home. So
okay.
Yeah, this is the psycho scene, the reference to Hitchcock, where Maude removes or slides away the photo, and you can see she's actually got a peephole into the bathroom, which is only a lot creepy. And when Marge finishes doing her business, she straightens up a photo, and Maude yells out, just wash your hands and get out.
Which again shows you there's people in Springfield doing so much worse than what Marge did.
Like peepholes, for instance.
They gotta keep an eye on Rotten Todd.
Even creepier. Those boys are getting ever closer to puberty, except that nobody ages in Springfield, so I guess it's fine.
Except certain babies.
Interesting point. So it's finally time for Marge's court case. They are in court, and unfortunately, going against them is the blue-haired lawyer, who is so confident in his case against Mrs. Simpson that he just opens up by talking to the jury about who's cuter, Tom Cruise or Mel Gibson.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, who do you find more attractive, Tom Cruise or Mel Gibson? What is the point of all this? Your Honor, I feel so confident of Marge Simpson's guilt, I can waste the court's time by rating the super hunks.
Oh, he's gonna win.
Which I wanted to ask something here, because we have Judge Snyder, who will appear in numerous Simpsons episodes, and he's clearly yellow in this episode. I'm pretty sure he's black in the rest of the series.
There are a couple of occasions where he is drawn in traditional Simpsons yellow.
So he's got reverse Smithers syndrome.
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. I think a lot of times just side characters get lost in the shuffle at the foreign animation studios. So just people who have no idea who these characters they're drawing are, I think, a lot of the times.
Or, again, just like you said, they haven't fleshed the character out yet, and they just need a judge, and they give him a random name. And then weeks later, when they're like, we need another judge, they're like, let's bring back Snyder, but make him more outlandish. Boys will be boys.
Well, we'll get back to the case of Quickie Mart versus Marge Simpson in just a moment, but first let's take a quick break and hear from our Podern family.
Writers are strange and lonely people. We tend to be trapped in our heads, thinking of characters, coming up with voices, setting scenes. It's a lonely, depressing lifestyle. I mean, some of us drink. Others put a shotgun in their mouth. Whatever it may be, writers need some type of outlet. And that's why Daniel Ford and I got together and created the Writer's Bone podcast to help writers and to keep them out of situations like an insane asylum or painting a wall with their brain matter.
You can subscribe to Writer's Bone on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. Head over to writersbone.com to check out our original fiction, essays, boneyard discussions, and more. And in the meantime, all you writers out there, and hell, all you non-writers out there, keep writing.
So we've got a couple of witnesses giving their testimony. First up is Helen Lovejoy, who talks about how Homer has a not great income, and the Simpsons home is often a mess. It seems like there's a lot of stress, and she's pretty sure that she does the gulp, gulp.
May we point out to the court that she made the drinky motion.
And you just see Marge slapping her forehead.
I like Professor Frank's testimony here, which had nothing to do with the case whatsoever, but he does point out in a very old photo somewhere in Dallas that there is a puff of blue hair on the grassy knoll.
In frame 146, if you zoom in, you can see a puff of blue hair sticking out behind the grassy knoll. The commentators pointed out that they actually were really sensitive to JFK jokes early on. And in fact, it wasn't until after the Oliver Stone movie JFK was released that they were able to start doing more of these, because it was more of a parody of the movie at that point instead of a parody of the real-life tragic event.
Or at least that's how they could play it off.
Exactly. It made it essentially okay. It became a target to satire, whereas before it was considered in bad taste.
Makes sense.
Just again, going back to how popular of a president that JFK was. And finally, we see Lionel Hutz actually start to have a breakdown in court. He's talking about the bourbon bottle that started it all, the brownest of the brown liquor, the oh-so-delicious and tempting. I can't drink that right now. I'm in the middle of court. Excuse me, Your Honor. He actually runs out of the courtroom to the payphone so that he can call his AA sponsor. And in this case, that AA sponsor was another Simpsons celebrity cameo. It was David Crosby, who is a singer and songwriter known for being a part of a folk rock supergroup, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, who they reference in this one. It's actually talking about David Crosby, Stephen Stills, and English singer Graham Nash. They were later joined by Canadian Neil Young and became Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Where this gets really fun is Phil Hartman, who plays Lionel Hutz, is the one calling David Crosby. And David Crosby is looking at an emblem for Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young that Phil Hartman himself actually designed in real life back in the 70s before The Simpsons was ever a thing.
the ties that bond, right?
I love it when they do stuff like this, because, I mean, honestly, that's the type of shit that, like, you just would never know. It's such a subtle joke, and when these things come out, that was something I got from both the commentary and IMDb and Wikipedia. It took a little bit of research to get all of that together, but it's a really interesting little just joke, and it's almost like, who is that joke for? But it's the type of thing that I think give The Simpsons a lot of rewatchability.
Absolutely. When you know the little inside stuff, you feel like you're smarter than everyone else in the room, which is the point of our podcast, I might add. Your friends will never get tired of you pointing out random facts about The Simpsons while you guys are watching it together after the 15th time you've seen it over your entire life.
Yeah, definitely bust these out at trivia nights and just to drive your friends crazy. That's what they're for. So Lionel Hutz was able to compose himself with the help of his sponsor. It's actually a really tender moment when they tell each other they love each other. It's pretty funny.
Did you see that he's actually in the courthouse later?
Yeah, that's a great scene when we find out that Lionel Hutz showed up to work with no pants. Sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves. You just get this great little moment of David Crosby shaking his head in disappointment of his person he's helping.
But that means he came to support him in his trial later on.
It is. That's really nice. It's good of a sponsor to do, right? That's what you're there for, is to be there for each other.
But back to the trial.
Apu is on the stand, and his memory is actually being questioned, being interrogated. He's asked, has he ever forgotten anything?
So, Mr. Nahasapima Pedalon, if that is your real name, have you ever forgotten anything?
Nope, I can recite pi to 40,000 places. The last digit is 1.
Pi. That was Homer cutting in on the trial.
So I love this next bit with Hartman, but first I have to point out that the Simpsons, once again, get their facts right, because they actually called NASA to verify the digit at the 40,000th place in pi, and it truly is 1. So for all you mathletes out there, this is yet another time where the Simpsons are nailing you with very intelligent and correct humor.
You can't always trust the Simpsons with their English, but you can always trust them with their math. You know, they do lots of math jokes over the years, too, and they've always been one for hitting the nail on the head with that. And obviously, you can't trust them on their use of higher language words, but I'm talking about Ralph failing English and being impossible.
Like cromulent.
There you go.
There's actually a math book, or a book based on the jokes, the math jokes specifically in The Simpsons, that I'm really interested in picking up at some point. I think it'd be a good read, but frankly, most of it's probably going to go way over my head.
By 40,000 digits.
Then we get probably my favorite bit in the entire episode. Lionel Hutz is trying to prove that Apu's memory might be flawed, that maybe he's not perfect. He turns around and says, if your memory's so good, then what color tie am I wearing right now? And we see from the point of view where we can clearly see his tie, and Apu describes it perfectly. It is a white and red striped tie tied in a double Windsor knot. Oh, really? is that the case? So if I'm wearing that right now, then why is it that I'm not actually wearing any tie at all?
It takes them so long. It's just a double Windsor. Like, you literally just have to pull on one side while you're holding the other, and it comes off.
It gets stuck, and that entire time he's just stalling, trying to hide the evidence. And my favorite part, the cherry on the whole bit, when he turns around and proves his point that Apu has now been discredited, and he's like, yes, if I'm wrong about that, perhaps I was wrong about Marge too. You can see the end of his tie hanging out of his sleeve, very obviously.
Yeah, and this is where I made the note that we talked about at the top of the show, where it's just, there are so many really great Lionel Hutz moments in this episode. It's the last few times he's been on, it's been like little bits and pieces, but he was a much more central character in this episode. And they just gave him so many great moments.
Very much so. And like most families do after a successful day in the courtroom, the Simpsons have Lionel Hutz over to their dinner table where he shares the good news that he's pretty confident that their mom won't be going to jail. Lisa's impressed and says, wow, you're like a modern-day Clarence Darrow, which... this right here is one of those moments that The Simpsons made me learn something, and it actually got me thinking. I had to look up and find out who Clarence Darrow was. He was one of the attorneys in the very famous trial, the Scopes Monkey trial, which was a legal case that was essentially religion versus science going back in 1925 about if teachers would be allowed to teach evolution in the classroom. At the time, they were not. And he was actually on the side defending the teacher that taught evolution, essentially. I don't have enough information to speak expertly on this, but it's a very interesting read. I was doing just a little bit of research about the trial, and I'd highly recommend you do the same if this is something that interests you. The point of this joke, though, is that Clarence Darrow is a very famous attorney, and if you went through any law school, this would have been a man that you would have heard of, because essentially the Scopes Monkey trial is on the same level as something like Brown versus the Board of Education or Roe versus Wade. And there's even some that believe that the character Atticus Finch from the novel To Kill a Mockingbird is based on this attorney, Clarence Darrow. This whole thing got me thinking, though, The Simpsons made me learn, and in a lot of ways, I think that you could make an argument, like the math jokes we were just referencing a few moments ago. With the state that our public schools are in here in the United States, I think you could argue that it would be a better educational experience to just do a Simpsons episode a day or maybe a week, whatever the time frame per episode is. I'm not sure. But essentially, by watching The Simpsons and dissecting every single math joke, history joke, science joke, current event jokes, or current events of the times jokes, I guess that would qualify as history, I would think that you could actually engage more students and have a broader, better education that we currently provide our kids.
Yeah, if you just show cuts and snippets of episodes, then you can incorporate that right now if you want to into a teaching program at a school. I mean, hell, there's classes at the University of Michigan that does Simpsons philosophy.
Well, that's a modern thing now, but I'm talking about literally from 4th grade or so, because you got to get your basics in. You got to get at least 2 of the 3 R's, right? But as soon as you got that under your belt, all the rest of that crap is relatively useless, depending on what field you're going into. So I would make the claim that The Simpsons could do it better.
It just depends, because the kids have to be smart enough to grasp the jokes and grasp when they're supposed to be holding in the information and when it's a joke and they're supposed to let the information go. But, like we've talked about numerous times, we can attribute The Simpsons to both of our senses of humor in a big way, too, so...
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, I'm just trying to find some way to tie this into educational programming so we can make a deal with the government and get this into get our podcast into the classroom.
Yes, because that's all the kids need to hear.
That's it. You listen to
fuck,
this.
Fuckity, fuck, fuck, fuck.
You don't even need the other 2 R's if you've got best darn diddly.
You just need the Richie.
Let me come down from my fever-induced delyria and get back to this episode.
Are you speaking in tongues? Because it kind of sounds like you were.
I pray for it every day, Richie. But yeah, so back at the dinner table with Lionel Hutz and The Simpsons, Bart actually is so impressed that he's like, "Sir, I want to be a lawyer because of you." Well, that's great, son. The one thing the world needs is more lawyers. Can you imagine a world without lawyers?
We get that great little dream sequence where everyone's holding hands. All the religions, I believe, too, are holding hands.
I think people of every ethnicity, every religion, it's
the coexist bumper sticker before it existed, right?
Simpsons did it, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Apparently, they originally wanted to get the Coca-Cola song, the like Coke and a Smile, but they couldn't get the rights for it. So if you listen real closely, you can kind of hear the piano jingle is very similar, but not enough to get sued over. This is the court day we talked about where Lionel Hutz accidentally shows up with no pants. He's making his closing case, and the judge points out, "Are you aware you're not wearing any pants?" And that's when David Crosby just shakes his head in disappointment. And Lionel Hutz decides he's going to make a move for a bad court thingy.
You mean a mistrial?
Yeah, that's why you're the judge and I'm the law-talking guy.
You mean the lawyer?
Right. And then it's time for the verdicts, but when the judge starts to read it, he says, "Wait a minute, this verdict's written on a cocktail napkin, and it still says guilty, and guilty is misspelled."
And Lionel Hutz is literally right below him, handing it up.
The real verdict does, in fact, match Lionel Hutz's, except it's presumably spelled correctly. Marge is guilty, and she's going to be sentenced to 30 days in prison.
For stealing a bottle of alcohol.
I want to point out here, like you talked about at the beginning of the episode, we are at least 2/3 of the way through this episode at this point, maybe even a bit further, and we're just now getting to Marge being in chains. I felt like the cops chose a real bad time, though. It's literally why Marge was mid-embrace with Homer that she got cuffed. I did love the little saying between Marge and Homer, the little discussion they had before Marge had to go. The kids, of course, are sad, and Bart also carries on the family tradition of cross-dressing in this episode as he dresses up as Bartina in his plan to bust out his mother. Of course, this is all just in a fantasy.
Oh, Bartina. Never trust a woman named Bartina.
Especially if she's wearing a red dress. Homer says, "I'm going to miss you, and not just the sex, but the food preparation. And the skills you have with all stains, of all kinds. But mostly, I'm just going to miss how lucky you make me feel in the morning." Marge hugs him and says, "Oh, I'll miss you too, homie." And this is when she actually gets cuffed, which I thought was just a little bit cold, because to your point, we're talking about a cheap bottle of whiskey here, bourbon, I guess. Either way, they treat Marge like she's just like a
she's Snake.
Criminal. Yeah, absolutely. There's a great bit, too, where Apu's like, "With her behind bars, our store is secure." Which Apu is technically right. The store was secure. Secured to the back of a flatbed trailer as Snake was taking it to Mexico.
All right. I just like saying that in his voice. It's fun. Which, did you notice that it actually shows you how far away Mexico is from Springfield?
Only 678 miles. So finally, almost to the end of the episode, my last page of notes, actually, and we are at the Springfield Women's Prison, a prison for women. Marge meets her cellmate, Phillips, who got that name because she killed her husband with a Phillips head screwdriver.
All right.
The funny part about this scene, though, is Marge is somewhat enjoying prison, especially the fact that she doesn't have to cook. Meals are made for her.
Your husband doesn't cook ever for you?
And she recalls a time where Homer tried to make her dinner, but he just brought her an uncooked fish that flopped around on the table.
Oh, that's so disgusting. Oh.
When she points out that she thinks it might be a little undercooked, Homer hollers back, "I'm sorry, Marge, but I'm having enough trouble with the lobsters, who are actually attacking him."
Who eats fish and lobster at the same time?
Marge then meets another friend for prison. This one's Tattoo Annie, who I actually really like her tattoo. I'm surprised no one's done this in real life, or maybe they had. They tattoo a Mad Magazine fold-in on their back, so that when she squeezes her shoulder blades together, it makes the Mad Magazine guy, and it says, "What, me worry?" So this was actually a leftover from the original plot line where Marge was going to be in prison longer, and there was actually going to be quite a few more of friends that Marge would meet, because more of the episode was originally planned to take place in the prison, but as we talked about, a lot more of that got trimmed for a lot of what they consider to be much funnier jokes.
I said at the top of the show, but I looked on where I was watching the episode at, and it was right over the 17-minute mark when Marge was going into the prison.
Yeah, so very close, because again, these episodes are only about 23 minutes, so
that's after the credits are over, they're 23 minutes.
Right, that's a good point. We see how the Simpsons' home is holding up without Marge. Homer has some ideas to avoid doing dishes. They're going to eat all of their meals without a plate sitting over the sink or the toilet. Lisa asks what they're going to do with Maggie, and Homer says they're just going to let her roam free in the backyard and let nature take care of business.
I mean, that worked in Simpsons Gone Wild, or whatever that episode is called.
She just needs to be taken care of by Santa's little helper, or whatever other creature she can seduce magically.
Yep.
Lisa is quick to point out, if we all just work together, it wouldn't be that hard to keep this house clean. And we pan to 10 minutes later where the house is an absolute shambles. We have graffiti by El Barto on the freezer, the ceiling fan is crashed to the floor, the dishwasher is over flooding as well as the sink, and essentially the entire house has gone to shit.
It's just great. The way that they show it is just so funny. It's just, Lisa gives that riveting speech when you feel like they're buying it, and literally goes 10 minutes later, and it's just a pigsty.
When the kids tell their dad that they're out of clothes, Homer's like, go check in the attic, there's a box of clothes up there. And then we see Homer, also in the family tradition, walking down the stairs, and what I have to assume is a very stretched out Marge's wedding dress, because you can actually see it's tearing at the seams as Homer's wearing it.
Very different weight classes, Marge and Homer.
But this is not the first time that Homer's worn one of Marge's dresses. We know from the golf episode all the way back, I believe, in season 2, when Flanders and Homer's bet each other over the mini golf game, they both ended up mowing in their wife's dress.
Yes, they do.
At school, Bart is starting to become a little bit made fun of because of the situation. He's comparing lunches with Milhouse, who has bologna and cheese. Bart just has a sugar packet and some peanut butter spread out on a playing card. Nelson comes over and says, "Ha ha, your mom's a jailbird."
So is yours.
Oh yeah, let's go play.
Yeah.
So it's visiting day at prison. Marge is excited to see the kids, but Homer actually shows up wearing an old Halloween costume. Which, I love it because it's the I Am Evil Homer costume that we saw.
Back-to-back weeks of Evil Homer.
Again, this is yet another remnant from the previous plot where it was going to take place more in the prison because Homer was actually going to use that costume to smuggle in, or there was some storyline where he was smuggling something into her. So the costume was actually not a throwaway joke. It just ended up getting turned into a throwaway joke when they switched plot lines.
Man, they had to cut so much out of this.
They really did. Marge was excited to see the kids, but she was far more excited to see Homer. We see him in the conjugal visit trailer, and Homer's like, I don't really know how you're going to feel, so if you just want to hold hands or cuddle, that's totally cool. And Marge turns into an actual, animal and, just leaps across the room so hard onto Homer that it actually tosses the trailer on its side. Like Braun Strowman style.
I don't know if you have notes on this or not, but I was trying to look for Marge's prisoner number, and there was one scene where she was turned kind of to the side, and you couldn't see the whole number, but I did see a 4601, which made me think that they are using the 24601 Jean Valjean from Les Mis number for the prisoner again, which they do frequently on the show.
I know they do that a lot, but I did not catch if that was the case in this episode or not.
When she was talking with Tattoo Annie and her cellmate, she was
Phillips.
That's where I saw she was slightly turned to the side, and I saw the 4601. So
that would make sense.
I'm assuming that they did that then.
So things are all out of whack in Springfield. They've put Marge in the box. She's buried beneath everyone else's shit. And it seems like she might need someone to save her, but as we're about to find out, I think it might come down to the town needing her to save them. We're at the Springfield bake sale, and the people are demanding those delicious marshmallow squares from last year. But unfortunately, that's what Marge made. When it's time to count the tally for the day, they come up $15 short, which is exactly the amount that Marge's delicious marshmallow squares would have brought in. And the town will no longer be able to afford that statue of Lincoln. They're going to have to go with someone else. Jimmy Carter. And the crowd starts to protest and yells out, He's one of history's greatest monsters!
This is the scene I alluded to at the beginning of the podcast where I made it clear that I'm not a fan of Helen Lovejoy just because of how gossipy they make her all the time. And just the sheer, terror in her face in this scene feels like the ultimate punch in the face, or slap in the face, if you will, from Marge to her, when she realizes that, she perpetuated a lot of this stuff, but in fact, because she kept Marge away, they're missing all their dreams, even though they're meaningless dreams at this point. It felt like sweet, sweet revenge, didn't it?
I like the scene, and again, the animation on this one is great, because her face is like a look of horror.
Horror, the horror!
Won't somebody think of the children? One last great bit with Chief Wiggum. Almost everything he did in this episode is hilarious, and this one not excluded. He's getting ready to release the dogs, because this town, when I said riot earlier, I wasn't kidding. I mean, full on, burning down buildings, breaking into stores, flipping over cars. Springfield is an absolute mess without Marge. So, the police are on the scene, you know what I mean. They're here to try to get the block back. They let the dogs out, and Lou points out, man, those dogs look extra feisty. Wiggum's like, yeah, I've been tasing them, and starving them, and singing off key.
And anybody that's a Game of Thrones fan, and I'm talking about Ramsay Bolton here, knows what's about to fucking happen. And I'm just calling it out that Simpsons did it years before Game of Thrones did it.
The dogs absolutely maul Wiggum, who is in between them and the riot when they let the door open. The town realizes that none of this would have happened if they just had Marge Simpson. So we cut to, I assume it has to have been the end of her 30-day sentence, where Homer's picking up Marge from prison. There's an embrace between her cellmate and Marge, who they clearly made a bond. Marge wishes Phillips luck in meeting a man. She points out that men are slime, but this new guy she's dating seems alright. His name is Homer, and he works at the nuclear power plant. And we see a picture of Barney waving to her from across the fence. Marge just groans and doesn't say anything, which is a little bit...
Makes her a terrible friend, right?
Yeah, it really does. She should probably speak up at this rate, or at least wait till she's on the other side of the fence, just in case Phillips gets a little bit stabby at the delivery of the news. You don't want to accidentally get shot because you're the messenger, but at the same time, you've made a connection with this person.
No, Marge truly belongs in prison if that's the way she's going to...
I love, too, the kids try to clean up the absolute pigsty of a house before their mother gets home, but Bart's like, I know, we'll just sweep everything under the rug. And literally their floor is, quaking and rocking as they walk across about it. Yeah, it looks like it's breathing. It's like the scene in Empire where they accidentally fly the Millennial Falcon into a creature and they think it's a cave. It's just with their house.
I like that you get the one guy that's usually like a repairman with the gray mustache. It's his voice where you can go like, ow, when they step on
somebody steps on him. Yeah. Well, it's time for the Simpsons reset. Marge arrives home from prison. The whole town is there welcoming her home. They've all missed her. Even Helen Lovejoy claims that she's from now on going to use her gossip for good. And Quimby presents Marge with the brand new statue, not of Jimmy Carter, but of Marge Simpson. It now says Marge forever instead of Malaise forever. And we end the show fading to black with the kids using the exceptionally tall statue with all 3 feet of hair. I guess it must be 8.5 feet tall. Which I wonder is that regulation size for tetherball? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Either way, it works for the kids. We see Bart and Lisa playing tetherball on the statue dedicated to their mother, the new town hero, as we fade to the credits, all restored for next week. Was there anything else that you or that book wanted to say about Marge and Chains?
I don't remember if we touched about this earlier, but it was revealed in this episode that Marge has webbed toes.
Oh yeah, that's right, during the gossip sequence.
That's the first time we actually heard this, because that's actually a true fact about her. And then I wanted to put more context on the Jimmy Carter statue, because it did say Malaise Forever on it before it changed to Marge Forever. And just in case you're wondering, Jimmy Carter gave a speech on July 15th, I believe, 1979, and it's got a lot of truth in today's world. He said things along the lines of...
Funny how that happens on The Simpsons.
Yeah, right? He gave a speech where it said, too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. He also talked about a growing disrespect for government or fragmentation and self-interest that prevent Americans from tackling the energy crisis that they confronted, the result of their over-reliance upon fossil fuels, and he said Americans, he warned, now face a crisis of confidence. If you read the full speech, it just kind of still hits the nail on the head, so to speak, and I just wanted to give a little more context on that phrase. I believe that was the speech had something to do with malaise. But besides that, the episode was better than I remembered. It's still a Marge episode where it kind of falters at certain spots, but I actually like the fact that she did not end up in prison for a longer time. Like, the stuff that they kept in this episode to cut out some of the main story, I think paid off in dividends for this writing in this episode.
I agree. I think that even though this felt like a Marge-centric episode, it was a Marge-centric episode, the way that they did a lot of the humor with some of the cutaways, I think helped a lot. And I tend to agree. It'll be interesting when we get to the Orange is the New Black parody episode. And we need to remember that we need to come back and do some comparisons to this one. Maybe there'll be some stuff that hit the cutting room floor for this episode that'll make its way back 20-something seasons later. It'd be fascinating to find out. But for now, let's go ahead and call it there. That's going to do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Richie, what would you like to plug before we get out of here?
As always, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at theWiz_Kid23. Also, while you're on Twitter, go ahead and give our show a follow as well. That's at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY.
And for me, I am at MrMostDaysOff. That works pretty much everywhere. For you wrestling fans, come and check out Lucha of the Hidden Temple on Voices of Wrestling. There's only a few short weeks left. We're going to be covering Ultimate Lucha 3, all 4 weeks of it. Come over to that podcast if you want to hear more about that. You can follow all things Best Darn Diddly at bestdarndiddly.com, and you can contact us at bestdarndiddly@gmail.com. Other than that, we just want to say thank you again so much for listening to the podcast. We appreciate all of you tuning in to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. The WizKid and I will be back again next week for the last Simpsons episode of the season, Krusty Gets Canceled.
And remember, people, stop buying suntan lotion that's also a laxative.
Until next time, be cromulent to each other.
Do you ever wonder what would happen if you had a robot select 3 random elements and then gave those elements to pretend entrepreneurs, and then those pretend entrepreneurs use those things to inspire amazing pitches? Hi, I'm Derek, host of The Wild Pitch, and I'll tell you what would happen. You get an absurdist Shark Tank style show called The Wild Pitch. New episodes every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever podcasts are found.